Welcome to Life's Rich Tapestry, a podcast exploring the narrative of people's layered lives. Listen in on courageous conversations spoken from the heart. Gain insight into another's life as we tackle compelling topics which will expand your mind, help you gain perspective, and might even inspire you to do things differently. My name is Evelyn, and I look forward to your company. And welcome to another episode of Life's Rich Tapestry. My next guest, Sarah Jane, or SJ as she likes to be called, is someone who you would describe as an adventurous spirit and whose athleticism has taken her around the world. She's ridden a pushbike from Mexico to Tierras del Fuego in southern Chile and the figure eight of Australia. International ski holidays were taken every year to exotic places like the Himalayas of India, Japan, Canada, USA, or New Zealand. Her passion for outdoor sports would lead her into guiding in Australia and overseas for many years before ultimately becoming an outdoor education teacher. Her world was changed forever when she would go in for a routine surgery of a herniated disc and woke up to find she had become a quadriplegic. I would like to welcome SJ to Life's Rich Tapestry. Thank you so much for being with me here today, SJ. It's truly an honor to have you here. So I just thought we'd start at the beginning. Where were you born? And just let our listeners know how it all started.
Sure, Evelyn. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Look, I was born in Sydney and I grew up in the northwestern suburb of Sydney of Castle Hill and had a very generic suburban upbringing with a family of 5. I'm the youngest of 3 children, and I went to a Catholic primary school and a Catholic girls' high school, and I was a little bit of a rebel and a little bit naughty, but that was kind of the growing up phase of my life back then.
Yeah, so when you say naughty, what do you mean by naughty?
I was a little bit rebellious. I was the kind of kid that would sneak up with my friends and hang out outside behind the convent. We'd smoke ciggies and wag school, spend the day at the beach. Yeah, I was just a little bit naughty back then.
Okay. Now, how about your interest in sports, though? How did that develop, or when did that develop?
Well, I was always a bit of a sporty spice at school. I was quite a high-achieving girl. As far as sports go, I was really good at netball. I was the rep netball player and played basketball when my team went to New Zealand. And, I was into everything, and I was a piano player, a really good piano player. Sports were just always a part of our family's life. We were the kind of weekend warriors of netball carnivals, and my brother was into soccer, and that was just kind of the way that we grew up.
So you started doing netball, but you also started skiing. When did you start skiing?
Well, skiing wasn't really introduced to my world until I was about 15, and I went on a weekend ski trip with my older sister, and it was a little bit of a rite of passage into getting older, I suppose, going on a trip with my big sis, and I just loved it so much. It was just one of those passions that suddenly developed, and I loved being in the mountains. I loved being in the alpine environment, and I actually do remember getting sort of tears in my eyes on the way home because I didn't want to leave.
Yeah, from your bio, you've skied all over the world as well. Did you have a favorite place that you like to ski at?
My passion with skiing was all about finding places that had fresh powder snow. So wherever there was fresh powder, I was happy to go. I did spend about 9 months in Canada when I was in my mid to late 20s, and that was a bit of a highlight. But Japan, the snow was just magnificent. There's no favorite place. As long as the snow was good, I was happy.
And how did you get this job in Canada?
My partner and I at the time, we did a lot of traveling, and we ended up in this particular place because it was somewhere that my brother had been, a little town called Roseland, about 6 hours in a range called the Kootenay Ranges in interior British Columbia. And when we were there, in order to sustain being there, I needed to get some work. So I got a job on the ski resort, which scored me a free lift pass. And I got a little afternoon job playing the piano in a bar for happy hour. And I also worked as a sandwich artist in Subway. They had a little Subway in the town. So that was my night job. I had 3 jobs. That helped sustain that time there in Rossland, the little town.
That sounds like such a great chapter in your life. You were young, skiing, and all those jobs. I've never heard of sandwich artist, but I like that term.
Yeah, well, that's what apparently they call them. I found out retrospectively. I just used to throw meat and salad on a bun, really.
So, what made you return back to Australia? I guess after Canada.
Look, I didn't initially come back home. We were still traveling around in North America a bit, but the birth of my niece Grace, who's now 18, I was the birthing support person for my sister. And so coming back and being a part of that was really important.
I'm reading here that a push bike was also very important to you. You've ridden all over Mexico and you've done the figure eight of Australia, which I must admit I'm not familiar with. So can you just let us know what that is all about?
All right. So my partner and he bought me a mountain bike for Christmas a year prior to this particular night. We were just sitting at a pub having a beer, talking about how we didn't really use our push bikes all that much and we really wanted to travel. So we just had this crazy idea that we were going to go on a cycle touring adventure, which I'd never done before. And we figured we wanted to go to somewhere that we didn't really know much about. And we ended up taking our push bikes in boxes to Mexico City and had this absolutely crazy idea that we were going to cycle tour through all of the countries of Central America. And we made our way all the way down to Panama in the very south of Central America. And there's a section of the globe there called the Darien Gap, and you can't actually get through. I'm not quite sure what it's like now, but you can't get through there. There's no roads through there. And it was around the time of quite a lot of guerrilla activity and unrest in Colombia. So we ended up flying to a town called Medellin in northern Colombia and then cycled down pretty much following the spine of the Andes until they petered out into the ocean in Tierra del Fuego in southern Chile.
Wow. And sorry, where did you stay along the way? Did you camp or how did that work?
Most of the time we'd just pull up and find somewhere to camp, and we were very frugal with our money. We met a lot of people along the way that we cycle toured with, and one couple in particular, we learned a lot of tricks of the trade in how to do it on a shoestring as much as possible. So we would camp a lot, and sometimes we'd stay in little hotels that we might find as well.
Wow. And how long did this adventure last?
That particular adventure lasted for about 14 months.
Oh,
and
wow.
Once we got to the very bottom, this partner asked me to marry him. So we got engaged, and then we made our way back up to North America, where we decided to have some time apart, and he went over and worked in the Central Oregon desert as a youth at risk outdoor guide, and I stayed in Toronto for a while and found myself a job guiding canoeing up at a camp in central Ontario. My push bike actually got stolen in Toronto, so I got a little bit stuck, and that changed the trajectory of the plan because I planned on cycle touring in North America as well. But we had to change our direction then, and that was about a 4-month bit of time working in Ontario. And after that, we met up. Stas came back over to Canada, and we worked as tree planters. We planted trees for a reforestation company in Wayne, Northern Ontario, which was one of the worst jobs I've ever had. It was like you got paid 7 cents a tree.
Oh my God.
It was brutal with the midgy flies that would bite little chunks of meat out of your skin and make you itch like crazy. And it was just a hard job, hard work. It taught me a lot about the decisions around work and making sure that you weren't just doing it for money, you actually enjoyed what you do.
Well,
but it gave us more money to travel more.
Obviously weren't making that much money, but enough, I guess, to continue on with your traveling around that part of the world. Now, how long then were you in Canada and North America?
Well, I probably spent about 18 months in North America. After the time in Canada, I, with one of the girlfriends that I met at camp, did a trans-Canadian drive and then met up with Stas again over there. We bought a little Dodge wagon van and did lots of travelling in that afterwards and eventually made our way back to Australia.
And sorry, how old were you at that time?
Oh, gosh, I must have been in my mid-20s.
Okay. So just for context, when was the skiing trip? Was the skiing after or before this trip when you did the skiing in Canada?
The Canada was before.
So you came back to Australia, and what did you do then?
We then had the sort of society guilt of, having to get real jobs and settling down. And we tried this for quite a few months and I got really bad depression. And we just decided that we just couldn't stay. So concocted another plan to just keep on traveling, because traveling, I think, eliminates or it actually takes away a lot of those life responsibilities and bills and having to get real jobs. And I think we were just trying to escape that. Basically, the plan was to jump on our bikes again and do a bit of a trip across to Western Australia. And then we thought that we might get to Southern Africa and cycle all the way up to the UK and then across and travel in a great big arc that made our way back to Australia. But we left the Blue Mountains and we got as far as the Kalmung River, which is in a national park quite close to where we live here. And we're sitting on the river having lunch on this, I remember it so clearly, on this log that crossed over the Kalmung Creek, the river, and just were looking around going, wow, how beautiful is this place? And this is just in our
backyard, yeah,
country.
Yeah.
And let's do that. So our plan changed in that instant, and that turned into an 18-month journey exploration of this country.
And you said he asked you to marry him when you were in Chile. Is that correct? So did you end up getting married?
We did end up getting married back in 2003 after all of this adventure. And then that then progressed into buying a 30-acre block of land down in Hartley Vale near where we lived. And we built a house, had a child, and that's all history now. A lot of all of that story has changed as life does change. And I'm in a very different chapter now.
So you started working for outdoor education, is that correct? When you were in Hartley Vale? Mm-hmm.
No, I started that when I was in my late teens, that aspect of my life. When I was at university, I did a degree in sports science, exercise science, but one of the electives was in outdoor recreation. And that was where I developed my love of the outdoors and the love of outdoor activity. And skiing, cross-country skiing, was one of those electives, which is where I found that passion. Mm-hmm. And part of the assessments of some of those electives was getting work experience in the area that you'd chosen. And I started doing work experience for outdoor education companies. And that was what I did as a profession for about 7 years, freelancing for a whole bunch of different outdoor ed organisations, working with mostly high school kids, taking them on wilderness expeditions and teaching them canoeing and rock climbing and abseiling. And really a lot of that was about team building and working together as a team, personal development, personal challenge. And I really was quite good at that and really loved it. Yeah, so after I'd done that as an instructor for many years, I came back from all of that travel and I actually started working for TAFE as a teacher to teach people how to do that sort of work. So I was training people how to outdoor guide. And it was while I was working I was working for TAFE in Lithgow and carrying a heavy bunch of ropes down to rig for an abseiling session. And in one of those particular moments, I just picked up a bag of ropes, heavy ropes, and that was the initial part of the injury. And I lived with it for a while. It was bad. And then I just exacerbated it over some time, lifting some heavy boxes up onto a shelf, and it became just a real problem.
Right. And did you go to a doctor and then he said, oh, maybe you need to have surgery or?
Yeah, look, I lived for a long time on pain relief and it just got too much. And there'd be nights where I'd be writhing around on the lounge room floor at 3 o'clock in the morning, just in agony from the pain that the pinched nerve was causing me. And really, it just got to the point where I just had to go to that last resort, which was surgery to have the relief on the pinched nerve relieved.
Right. And just how old were you at that stage?
I was 39.
You were 39. Okay. So you're fairly healthy, fairly athletic. So you go in for this. It's a routine surgery, I'm assuming. Is that correct, what you went in for?
Oh, absolutely. Routine surgery. The surgeon said to me there was a 5% risk. Like, it was for the main bread and butter for him, that type of surgery. And he told me that there was like a 5% risk that I might lose some sensation to the left thumb where I was getting a lot of tingling.
So then you went in for the surgery. What happened? Did you wake up and think something's not right here, or what happened?
Well, you know, when you wake up from an anesthetic and you're just all kind of groggy.
Yeah.
I remember waking up from the surgery and just went to sit up. And I heard the doctor saying, oh, surgery went really well. And I just went to wake up and get up and I just couldn't move.
And what did the doctor say at that stage when you couldn't move? Did he look puzzled or? Well,
it was actually the registrar, and it's very hard to remember. It's one of those periods of my life where it's all a little bit of a blur. And I basically just remember there being a whole lot of confused and concerned phone calls. And I think they really must have sedated me because I'd started to panic, and they put me into an MRI, and then I think I ended up in ICU. And look, it's all very blurry what happened from then.
How long was it before you found out that this has totally changed your life?
Oh, look, quite frankly, it was within a week or two.
Yeah.
But I was in just a state of denial that because I'd been such a hard ass and I'd really just pushed through so many hard things, I thought, it's something that I was going to beat and overcome.
So how long were you in the hospital before they released you, or what was the process after that?
Yeah, I must have been in the hospital itself for about probably 8 weeks. And then from there, if you have a spinal cord injury, you generally go to a rehab facility. And the main one that I'm aware of is at Royal Rehab in Ryde. And I was in there for about 9 months. And that was a lot of rehab and a lot of different therapies. And then I was shipped along to the next phase of the journey.
You have your young son at that stage. How old was he when this was happening?
Hamish at that time would have been 5.
And who was taking care of him at that stage? Was it his father then? And
his dad. That's right.
His dad. So they were able to visit you every day, I'm assuming, or?
Well, they were there for half of the week, staying in a little hotel nearby. And then I just had some other people that would come and go. And, it was a horrendous time.
How long did it take before you were in the hospital till when you were able to move into your own home in the Blue Mountains?
Well, I guess after that 9 months, I came back and moved into Hartley Vale, but there's another backstory which we haven't spoken about at all. Something that's kind of significant to mention was the fact that a week before the surgery, my husband and I were going through a trial separation.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's another really big backstory between this obvious trauma in my life, but there was some other really big changes happening in my life as well. And we can go there and discuss that
Yeah.
if you think it's relevant. Yeah.
So this is another sort of element. So you're going into routine surgery thinking you're going to be fine, and then this happens. How did your relationship progress then?
Well, it's it's a quite a deep and personal phase of my life, but about 6 months before all of this occurred, I'd actually fallen in love with a woman, and that had changed the whole trajectory of that journey.
Yeah.
And so there was probably even more trauma in that experience
Wow.
than at the time the adaptation to living in a body that was quadriplegic. And it's a huge part of that was trying to adapt to how this was all going to work. And I was in such a state, I was having to make decisions around my bigger part of life while all of this was going on. So it was extremely tumultuous.
Your world has really changed forever. What steps have you taken for this transition? How's that journey been for you?
Hard.
Yeah.
And really challenging. And there's been highlights. There's been times when I've been really strong with it. And it's just been a typical journey that has ups and downs. And right now in my journey, it's a new phase of challenge. The relationship that I was in slowly started to fizzle out because of the amount of depression and change and angst that I was suffering. And my biggest fear did occur after not too long, that I was traveling the journey as a single woman.
And how has this affected the relationship with your son?
Hugely. In the early days, I was so determined to try and still be a mother that I made decisions like to make sure I had a power wheelchair, and I would wake up in the mornings when he was in kindergarten. He began his schooling career, and I would sit him on my lap. We lived about 1.5 kilometres from the school, and in Blackheath it's freezing cold, so I'd get all rogged up, but my absolute determination to get my boy to school was the main drive that made me feel like I had a purpose. So I would get him to school. How has it changed? He wouldn't know the difference now between me and an able-bodied me. And I guess I have a lot of grief around how my relationship would have been and could have been with him. And I've just got to continually live with that and just hope that my interaction with him is enough, and providing him with enough as an emotional support. I was so and am so absorbed in my own recovery daily that it's changed in the way how I wished it would have been. It's just not. So my perception of it has really changed. It's deep. It's really very deep.
Yeah. Now, how did the Heart Project come about?
Oh, the Heart Project was fantastic. That came about because some people had some funding. These two photographers. One was a conceptual photographer, and one was a story art professional. And they were trying to find a story that they could create their art in these two different art forms and create a couple of mini documentaries on how they could use their art to tell a story. And then the gift from the woman that did the story art, she used to make these gifts to people by creating pictures of Photoshop people's lives to make them look a certain way. And so she created some really beautiful artwork for me that showed pictures of me. Oh, well, one of them was me walking and doing, it was called the leap of faith. And I'm on one side of a cliff and Hamish is on the other. and we're walking towards each other using little floating pieces of rock where we're stepping across on these pieces of rock.
Mm-hmm.
And she made these 3 beautiful paintings or pictures that were given then as a gift to me. And the conceptual photographer, his name was Ben Von Wong, he actually got me out hanging on a cliff in a wheelchair and took this amazing photograph of me hanging on a cliff with Hamish abseiling down over the top of me. And these 2 different art forms were ways of showing the adventurous side of me, but just using their 2 different forms of art.
Wow. I did see the photos, some of the photos, and I thought they were amazing. I don't know how they did that, but they were amazing. And what cliff was that? Was that out in Katoomba? Or?
That particular cliff was out at Mount York in Mount Victoria.
Okay. I love that photo. And I'm going to put links in the show notes so that people are able to see that whole project that was, so I thought that was really, really good. Now, there was, you were talking about at a recent meeting, I heard you speak about recreation and recreation. And you were talking about something called sit skiing. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So that became one of my tickets back into life again, if you like. I left rehab, and about a day after, I was straight in the car and I was introduced to a guy called Paulie. And Paulie was the director of Disabled Winter Sports Australia. And Paulie took me back out to Thredbo. And a sit ski is like if you can imagine the seat being a boot and your body is the foot, and you get in this boot and then there's skis underneath the seat. And then the guide is behind you holding on to like mountain bike handles. And there, Paulie's kind of like on his own skis, but he's sort of driving the thing down the mountain while I sit in it in front of him and we ski.
Wow, that sounds scary to me. That must have been was it scary for you, or was it just like, oh my God, were you feeling like you were skiing again?
Oh, absolutely. Look, it was a feeling like skiing again. However, I had to battle with the idea of it not being the same as the skiing that I used to do. But it was just a mode of transport that just got me back out into the mountains again.
Are you able to do that often or as much as you can, or how does that work?
Well, early on when it all began, and Polly and I were sitting on a tea bar at Thredbo, and we were having such a great day. It was a blue sky, beautiful day, and we were having so much fun. And we hit it off as friends, and he's become one of my best friends. In fact, I went to his wedding a few months ago down in Jindabyne. But we decided that we could take it somewhere. We could really dream some big dreams about it. We had this crazy dream of just going and travelling overseas. And I would go back to Thredbo every year and ski with him maybe, a couple of weeks each year. And we decided to do a trial overseas trip. And we went to Utah in the States and skied around a place called Salt Lake City.
Oh, wow.
And that was just magnificent because I got to ski in some beautiful powder over there. And we had another exciting journey where we went to Japan and we took the ski to Japan. And these were all with my son because I was always really desperate to try and recreate experiences that I would have done with Hamish, because earlier on in the year before my injury, we'd taken him to Gulmarg, which is a resort in Kashmir. And I just wanted to keep making sure that he got those adventurous experiences. So I guess I was just really inspired to keep doing that. And one of the biggest, most magnificent experiences was taking him over to Alaska, and we went heli skiing in Alaska.
Wow.
Many years ago now.
Gosh, you are so adventurous. So you haven't let what has happened to you, you found other ways to get around it, to still do the recreation or that you love so much to do. You find other ways around it. But I can imagine it's probably been really difficult for you. But what keeps you going?
what keeps me going? What kept me going back then was just a drive to constantly being a mum.
Yeah.
And I think there's quite a lot of belligerence inside me and wanting to defy and beat and overcome what challenges are there in front of me. And I did that quite intensely for quite some time. But, you know, and it gets quite exhausting trying to do that. What really helped was having an amazing carer at the time, a carer that could facilitate all of these adventures. And we even went on a holiday to Mexico, which was pretty fantastic. But it was there's just always been this thing inside me of wanting to do something bigger and better than Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
And that was a part of who I was in my youth. And as I age and get older, that's getting further and further away. So I'm not quite sure what's inspiring me at the moment. I did get an assistance dog from Assistance Dogs Australia, and she helped inspire me to keep getting out. And I don't know, I've got a part in it, it's in my blood.
Yeah.
That just makes me want to make sure I keep getting out and doing stuff.
Do you still have a relationship with Hamish's father? Are you guys friends now? And
absolutely. We live in the same town, and he's still very supportive. We share the time that Hamish lives with us. I've got Hamish half of the week. Hamish is a teenager now, so it's a very different experience of parenting. And it's also it's hard. I really miss the younger days where he always really wanted to do things with me, and I could do things that he would be interested in, whereas now it's more about being with mates. So there's a new phase in my life that I'm struggling. I'm really struggling just to try and find a new way to forge forward at the moment.
To me, you really do inspire me. The diversity you've gone through and how you've come out of it, I just really do admire that. Have you thought, like you said, you're struggling now to figure out what the next chapter is?
Okay, in theory, I've been able to tap into a really amazing man who works for Sargood, which is a resort hotel in Coleroy down on the northern beaches. And they are a holiday resort that's been built, set up and established for people with spinal cord injury. So the infrastructure is all there for me to go and stay on a holiday independently with staff that are trained in personal care for people that have spinal cord injuries, but they offer a whole lot of recreational experiences that are adapted. For example, I've been able to go paddling in a kayak, and I've been able to ride a bike. We've got adaptive equipment now with our technology. And with his assistance, I'm about to start getting into mountain biking again. And I put a deposit. It's going to take months to get made and sent over from the States, but I've put a deposit on one of these mountain bikes, and they're 3 wheels, 2 wheels at the front, 1 wheel at the back, and it's an e-bike. So I'll be able to pedal it with my arms and hopefully be able to get out on some of the trails around the Blue Mountains and do that with my boy. But we had this idea, this concept that maybe I might be able to get in another cycle touring trip using that bike. And that's a recreational aspiration that I have. But a couple of other things, as you and I have met doing our Toastmasters, I've been involved in talking at some high schools. My sister works at Pymble Ladies College down in Sydney, and I've done a couple of talks at her school, went really well. One of them was a huge event with about 500 students in year 9 and 10, talking to them about my story and sharing with them some of my insights and experiences. And I never really know what students or anyone's getting at with the babble that comes out of my mouth. But I hear you say, SJ, you're an inspiration. And that, I guess we need inspiration. I need inspiration. I want someone to inspire me at the moment. So I guess I'm working towards trying to improve my public speaking abilities, and finding the belief in myself that I am inspiring, finding the experience in life to keep me feeling inspirable. And I recently had a conversation with one of my old colleagues who I worked with many years ago in TAFE, when I worked for TAFE for about 10 years. Now, she's still the head teacher in the outdoor leadership course that I used to teach in. And I've been reaching out. I reached out to her recently and just said, listen, Hayley, I need to find some purpose again. I need to work. I need to get back out there. There's something in my blood that really still needs to be involved with that outdoor side of life. And I've got so much experience, and I really do believe I've got so much to give, but it's kind of getting wasted away in my sort of a little bit of isolation at the moment, having gone through COVID, and I've had a lot of injuries and sickness and in and out of hospital a lot in the last few years, like a lot of trauma. And I said to Hayley, look, can I come in? Well, actually, I'll precede this with a quick story about my friend Sarah. She was teaching a wilderness first aid course, and I asked her, could I come out and just get involved with maybe helping, debrief the students in their performance doing scenarios. So I went out and met Sarah and the group a few months ago and gave my input in the debrief for how the students performed in their first aid scenarios that were set up. And my contribution to that was quite valuable, and it felt really special. It felt like I was back in my skin again. And it just gave me this idea that I need to do something like that again. So this was the impetus for me contacting my friend Hayley, the head teacher in outdoor leadership. And I called her, and she's a good friend. And I said, listen, man, I've really just got to find a way to get back out there and give back and have a purpose. And she was really, really excited to hear from me and reminded me of a time that we worked together. This is going back maybe, I want to say 20 years ago. It's probably not quite that long. But I went out on a course with her where we were teaching the kids out in the wilderness. And one of my jobs was to show the kids, the students, that you could get creative with providing meals for your clients when you're out on trips. And I'd completely forgotten about this, but Hayley reminded me that I prepared the meal one night, and she said, SJ, I remember you made this baked camembert dish with roasted walnuts and a maple syrup glaze. And that's the kind of thing I'd always just put in 150% to whatever I was doing. And that just reminded me that that's in me. And I said to Hayley, can I come and speak to the students? Can I offer? I've got so much to offer. And she just said, SJ, I would love you to do that. But, how about you upgrade your training and assessment skills, qualifications, and I can give you work. I can give you a job again. So possibly, Evelyn, I may go back to working a little bit in my old work.
Oh, that'll be great. I think your physicality was so much a part of you, and to lose that, but still remain involved and think of other ways how to do, like, the sit skiing, still traveling with your son, getting him involved in sports. I find that very inspiring. I feel some people may have just given up and thought, oh, I just can't do this. But you've found other ways to get around that. And that's, I think, inspiring to people. So I think you're inspiring, even not saying anything, just the way you get around and you do things, because I can imagine it must weigh on you. I can just imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. It comes in waves. I see it. I worked a lot with the narrative therapist who helped me to try and use some of my previous skills in life. And we've used metaphors a lot to help me forge a way forward. And one of the main metaphors that I've used is the concept of an outdoor expedition where you get hammered by weather or you get lost in navigation, but you've got all these tools that you've learned. And sometimes I forget that I've got a compass in my backpack and I've got there's a sun behind the clouds that can show you where north is. And sometimes, all those tools get lost at the bottom of your backpack, and the sky is clouded and the sun's not there to show you the direction. And I've been through quite a lot of those phases lately in my life due to a lot of setbacks. For example, three emergency surgeries last year that threw me back into hospital. One of them was a 5-week hospital stay with 2 weeks in intensive care. And it's really hard to come back to who you are when you're placed in a situation where you become the sick patient, and that's really become my recent experience. So there's a big challenge going on right now to try and dig my way back from these experiences. I mean, even 3 weeks ago, I fell out of my wheelchair and banged my head on the tiles and gave myself concussion, which put me back in hospital and back in bed, and feeling like I'm recovering a lot from physical illness and challenge. So I'm not the same person as I was. I don't feel like I've got the same drive as I did, and it's due to all these external circumstances. And it gets exhausting for that belligerent SJ to try and keep coming back.
Yeah.
But she's in there. It's like the pilot light is still burning, but the main burner is not burning at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So do you have someone who comes in and does some caring for you, or how does that work? Or does Hamish help you out, or how does that work?
I have a team of carers. I manage my own care package through the NDIS, and I have a team of carers. There must be about 6 or 7 of them that come in, help me get up in the morning, and I have been trying all of this time to maintain my independence as much as possible. But then I do live on my own, so there's quite a bit of challenge around the loneliness of that. But I then have the carers come in and help me get into bed at night. And I really made an effort not to make Hamish responsible for taking on that carer role. I wanted him to maintain the fact that he was a boy, that I wanted him to grow up as normally as possible without feeling the responsibility of having a mum that needed him to help me all the time.
Yeah.
But he is around, and when he's around, I do ask him, can you get me something from the fridge if I'm in bed? And can you pick up that? And and the other night he sort of had a harumph and I said, what's the matter? He said, oh, it's just so annoying. I've got to get things for you all the time. And I just said to him, listen, mate, I'm just so grateful. You've got to realise I'm really grateful for it. Yeah. And we had a bit of a conversation about it. And I said to him, I really didn't choose this, mate. This isn't my choice to be in this predicament. And the gorgeous thing at 13, he said, look, I take it back. I take back what I just said because, I get it. Like, he really has developed quite a deep empathy.
How have you changed mentally through this experience?
That's such a big question, Evelyn. How have I changed? Well, look, one of the metaphors that I think I often use is this one of, and look, talking of natural disasters, because we've had so many in our climate lately, but the concept of a tsunami or a wave. We talk about how hardship and moods come in waves. And my waves haven't just been big waves, they've been tsunamis. Yeah. And after each tsunami, the village gets wiped out, and you've got to look at the village and just go, oh, okay, I've got to rebuild my village again. Yeah. And many times, I've kind of gotten to the stage where I've just started to get rid of the rubble, and another tsunami will hit. But there's no choice. There's no option. There was a time earlier on, like maybe 3 or 4 years in, or maybe even 2 years into this journey, where I really, really contemplated ending my life. That was, I really actually went to the whole extreme of researching, trying to find a pill that I could take. And there's a whole other backstory that's probably a bit too heavy to talk about at this point. But these tsunamis come, and you can't build them back on your own. So one of the big lessons that I've learnt is how critical it is to reach out, and how much people around you are willing to help if you do reach out, but they're not going to unless you reach out for them.
Yeah.
So I guess I was really quite good at reaching out. And I think early on, when people respect and appreciate just the trauma that you've been in, particularly after a death, the meals come and the flowers come, and then the flowers stop coming after a while, after a death, but this grief goes on. It's going to be a grief that lives with me forever. So it's important for me to keep on reaching out because the grief changes. And at the moment, there's a grief around me losing the small little boy that I had in my life. Like these are just normal griefs now. Like I've got to live with the body, the physical body that I live in. But my griefs are now sort of, although that exists, they're now normal life griefs around losing that little boy. He's now a teenager, and the grief around him changing. And so I think probably the biggest lesson is just knowing that the tsunamis are going to keep on coming, but you can get to a point where you might rebuild your own self, the village, the metaphorical village, and it may or may not end up looking like you wish it to, and you can't control when these tsunamis come. So you've just got to hand it over, the concept of trusting that life isn't here to make it hard for you, but these hard things happen, and you do get what you need if you're really open to it and stop trying to run on your own will of the way that you want it to be, because that's when I suffer.
Yeah. Wow. That's just blown my mind. I absolutely love hearing you speak because there's so much wisdom. You do inspire me, and I think you inspire many people just for the resilience and what you've gone through. Thank you so much for being with me here today. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we finish up this interview?
Look, just that I think I sometimes forget that everyone else out there has got their own suffering, and suffering is all relative. And I really believe that connection of each other and making sure, one of the tools I think that's been quite significant for me, I have these pity parties. Like I get caught up and it turns into being depressed because I have these pity parties, and it's like I'm sitting at a bar and I'm saying to the barman, I've got a line of shot glasses in front of me, and it's just like, pour me another glass of pity, and I'll shoot them down until the point I just can't get drunk on pity anymore, and I get sick of it. And that's when the end of that's when the cleanup of the tsunami often begins, because we're only as pitiful and sorrowful for ourselves as long as we let ourselves be. But one of the anecdotes for that is reaching out to someone else who's probably having the same pity party and reminding myself that there's other people out there that are also struggling, because life is hard.
Wow.
This is a really hard existence. I mean, life is good. It can be happy and fun and joyful, but particularly as we get older, or even for the youth, there's so much suffering and struggling out there that we need to share it. We don't want to endure it on our own. It's hard enough. Yeah. So the reaching out is really important.
Yeah. I think that's why you would be perfect speaking at high schools. Like you said, you've started that with your sister, but to continue on, I think you'd really inspire the youth. You inspire me, actually. So I just wanted to thank you for coming today on my show. I'd love to have you back, and you can let me know if speaking to high school students, which I think you would do really well at, or speaking to other people on a grand stage, I think would also really be great. So thanks again, SJ, for being with me here today.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you so much for your company. Please tune in next week to Life's Rich Tapestry, where you will hear another courageous conversation spoken from the heart.